Ladies and gentlemen, may I please request you to be seated? We will begin in another 5 minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, may I please request you to be seated? We will begin in another 5 minutes. Please request you to be seated. We will begin in another 5 minutes. Good evening, respected dignitaries, esteemed guests, and PHFI family. It's my absolute pleasure to welcome you all to the Foundation Day lecture of Public Health Foundation of India. I'm Dr. Ashna Mehta, and I will be your host for today's momentous occasion. As we prepare to commence today's proceedings, it is my privilege and honor to invite our distinguished dignitaries to grace the stage. I first invite Mr. S. Ramadurai, Chairman PHFI and Chairman Karam Yogi Bharat, to take his place on the dais. I would also like to welcome on stage the chair of today's program, Professor Ajay Kumar Sood, Principal Scientific Advisor to the Government of India and Chairperson of the Prime Minister's Science, Technology and Innovation Advisory Council. This year's Foundation Day lecture will be delivered by Professor David Heyman, Professor of Infectious Disease Epidemiology at London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine on the topic Infectious Diseases Threats to Health Security, the Paradigm Shift Required for a More Secure Future. I request Professor Heyman to take his place on the dais. Thank you, Professor Sood and Professor Heyman, for accepting our invitation. We are deeply honored by your gracious presence. Joining them on dais, we have Professor Sanjay Zodpe, President PHFI, Professor Preeti Kumar, Vice President PHFI, and Dr. Raj Shankar Ghosh, Senior Advisor PHFI. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming the dignitaries with a warm round of applause once again, please. The Public Health Foundation of India was established in the year 2006 as a public-private initiative with a vision to strengthen India's public health institutional and systems capability and provide knowledge to achieve better health outcomes for all. PHFI has established 5 Indian institutes of public health in different parts of the country. Since its inception, PHFI and IIPHS have worked to establish a robust evidence base for public health in partnership with multiple stakeholders by advancing policy and program relevant research in prioritized health conditions. PHFI has focused on building a trained public health workforce through India-relevant educational courses and training programs. PHFI now ranks second globally among schools of public health, and that deserves another round of applause. Today, we gather to celebrate PHFI's journey as we acknowledge the relentless efforts of everyone who has been part of this remarkable story. It's a day to pay a tribute to our vision and values, reflect on our achievements, and honor our legacy while keeping our sights firmly on future endeavors. On behalf of the PHFI family, I would like to express our gratitude to all those who have joined us today. We are honored by your presence. We are privileged to be joined today by our illustrious chairman, Mr. S. Ramadurai. Mr. Ramadurai was in public service from February 2011 to October 2016. He served as the chairman of the National Skill Development Agency and the National Skill Development Corporation. Currently, he's the chairperson of Mission Karam Yogi Bharat, the national program for civil services capacity building. Mr. Ramadurai is also chairman of the advisory board at Tata Strive, the Tata Group CSR Skill Development Initiative. He serves as an independent director on the boards of Piramal Pharma Limited, as well as DSP Asset Managers Private Limited. In March 2016, he retired as the chairman of the Bombay Stock Exchange after 6 years of service. Mr. Ramadurai took over as the CEO of Tata Consultancy Services in 1996 and subsequently served as the vice chairman from 2009 to 2014. He is the chairperson of PHFI and president emeritus of the Society of Rehabilitation of Crippled Children. In recognition of his commitment and dedication to the IT industry, Mr. Ramadurai was awarded the Padma Bhushan in 2006. In 2009, he was conferred the Commander of the British Order of the British Empire by Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II for his contribution to Indo-British economic relations. You should just let the applause go on. In 2016, he received the Economic Times Lifetime Achievement Award. More recently, in 2025, he was honored with the Sankara Ratna Award by the Sankara Netralaya Medical Research Foundation for his contribution to nation building and social impact, and the Assam Saurabh for his outstanding contributions to education and institutional development. Mr. Ramadarai is a renowned global leader and technocrat. I would like to invite our chairman, Mr. S. Ramadarai, to deliver welcome remarks on behalf of the PHFI family, sharing his reflections on today's event.
Good evening, everyone. Professor Ajay Kumar Sood, Principal Scientific Advisor to the Government of India. Professor David Heyman, Professor of Infectious Disease Epidemiology at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. All the dignitaries on the dais and all of you, senior management, faculty, researchers, staff, students of PHFI, invited guests, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the PHFI family, I'm delighted to welcome you all to the PHFI Foundation Day celebrations this evening. One of the most important days for this institution, which has, as said, started way back in 2008, and it's one of the most premier institutions in the country and also across the world. The PHFI Foundation Day program brings together a galaxy of stakeholders who are engaged in advancing public health in the country. Healthy population is the foundation for a strong workforce. It drives economic growth and development. PHFI and its established institutions are contributing towards advancing the public health agenda in the country. They support capacity strengthening, conduct program and policy relevant research, provide technical assistance, and support wider community engagement for improving population health. PHFI will continue its work for supporting the vision of a Swasth Bharat. India has made remarkable progress in its health indicators in the past decade. We have witnessed multiple initiatives that have improved the health system structures, programs, and intervention delivery. The system-wide interventions have been driven through a proactive and impactful work of the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, the Government of India, and of course the state governments. This year, we have Professor David Heyman, who will deliver the Foundation Day lecture on infectious diseases, threats to health security, the paradigm shift required for a more secure future. He is a leading global expert, and his wide experience of engaging with health systems across the world will certainly benefit the audience, especially since he witnessed India's public health work at close quarters from the smallpox eradication program times. We are also immensely privileged that Professor Ajay Kumar Sood, Principal Scientific Advisor to the Government of India, will chair the Foundation Day program and provide a special opening remarks. Professor Sood is providing leadership to advance a national scientific agenda, which includes several health initiatives like the National One Health Mission. The topic of this Founders Day lecture is very important in an interconnected and a globalized world. Infectious disease outbreaks do not recognize any boundaries. They can quickly turn it into local and regional emergencies. The COVID-19 pandemic has reminded all of us that our health systems must evolve to keep with the disease challenges of our present and future. To ensure a safer future, we must adopt a clear strategy. This includes strengthening health systems, especially surveillance, improving global teamwork, ensuring fair and equitable access to healthcare, and connecting human, animal, and environmental health through the One Health approach. Making these changes is essential for managing today's challenges and building resilience against future health threats. Again, I welcome you all to the deliberations of the evening, and thank you all for your presence. Thank you, dignitaries. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir, for your inspiring words. As we gather here to celebrate the legacy and achievements of PHFI, it is my honor to invite the visionary whose leadership has been pivotal in steering our institution towards excellence. Please join me in extending a very warm and heartfelt welcome to our esteemed president, Professor Sanjay Zodpe, for introducing the chair and speaker for today's program.
Thank you, Dr. Ashna. Good evening. Esteemed dignitaries on the dais, Professor Ajay Kumar Sood, Professor David Heman, Mr. Ramadurai, my colleagues, Professor Preeti Kumar and Dr. Ashankar Ghosh, members of the PHFI family, esteemed guests, and ladies and gentlemen. I'm delighted to welcome you all to the PHFI Foundation Day celebrations this evening. It is my honor to introduce the chair for today's event, Professor Ajay Kumar Sood. Professor Ajay Kumar Sood is the principal scientific advisor to the Government of India from April 2022. He is the chairperson of the Prime Minister's Science, Technology and Innovation Advisory Council. Professor Sood is also a National Science Chair Professor at the Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore. He was a member of the Prime Minister's Science, Technology and Innovation Advisory Council from 2018 to March 2022 and from 2009 to 2014. He had served as a member of the Scientific Advisory Council to the Prime Minister of India. Professor Sood has a doctorate in physics from the Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore. His research interest includes the physics of quantum materials as well as the soft and active material. He has published more than 480 papers in peer-reviewed journals and holds several patents. His work has been recognized by many awards, including the Padma Shri, the fourth highest civilian award in India. He was the president of Indian National Science Academy from 2017 to 2019, president of Indian Academy of Science from 2010 to 2012, and the Secretary General, the World Academy of Sciences, Italy 2013 to 2018. He was elected to the Fellowship of the Royal Society of UK in 2015. He has received the Shanti Swarab Bhatnagar Prize, the G.D. Birla Award for Scientific Research, the Toss Prize in Physics, the Millennium Gold Medal for the Indian Science Congress Association, the Sir C.V. Raman Award of the UGC, and Homi Bhabha Medal of the Indian National Science Academy. GM Modi Award for Science and Technology, 25th Science Sri Chandrasekharan Saraswati National Eminence Award in the category of Science and Technology, and Ashutosh Mukherjee Memorial Lifetime Award of Indian Science Congress, among others. He has been conferred Doctor of Philosophy honoris causa by many universities globally. He serves as associate editor in reputed international journal ACS Nano. We are fortunate to have you, sir, to chair today's Foundation Day lecture. Now it is my privilege to introduce you the speaker of the evening, Professor David Heman. Professor David Heman is a medical epidemiologist and professor of infectious diseases epidemiology at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. From 2009 to 2017, he was the chair of UK Health Protection Agency and then Public Health England. And during this period, he has also led the Center on Global Health Security at the Chatham House in London. From 1989 to 2009, Professor Heman held various leadership positions in infectious diseases at World Health Organization. And in 2003, he headed the WHO Global Response to SARS in his role as an executive director of communicable diseases. In 1976, after spending 2 years working in India on smallpox eradication, he was a member of the CDC Atlanta team to investigate first Ebola outbreak in DRC and stayed on sub-Saharan Africa for 13 years in various field research positions on Ebola, monkeypox, Lassa fever, malaria, and other tropical diseases. Professor Heman has published over 275 peer-reviewed articles and books chapters. He's the editor of Control of Communicable Diseases Manual as an elected member of the UK Academy of Medical Sciences and the US National Academy of Medicine. In 2009, he was named as Honorary Commander of the Most Excellent Order of the British Empire by the Services of Global Health. We are honored, Professor Heman, to have you today to deliver the Foundation Day lecture. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Zodpe, for the introduction of Professor Sood and Professor Heman. We are related to have Professor Ajay Kumar Sood as chair of today's event. With great pleasure, I invite Professor Sood to share his thoughts and address us on this special occasion.
Thank you very much. First of all, my apologies for being late by few minutes, which was not in my control. It is a privilege to stand before you on this very important function of PHFI Foundation Day in the presence of dignitaries on the dais, Mr. Ram Durai, Professor Heman, Dr. Sanjay Jodpe and others, and all the dignitaries in the audience, and all the experts in medical field. When Professor Jodpe came to me requesting for coming for this event, I was very happy because I thought I'll use this occasion for some advertisement of what we are doing in the office of PSA in the last few years. And so this few minutes, in about 13-14 minutes, I'll say a few things which are related to health. And this is from the point of view of just telling you what our plans are. And I will be very happy if many of you can join these efforts, because it's a collective effort for the country. And we'll be very glad to partner with any of you who feel similarly. So this, okay, so it's there on. So this is looking at transforming healthcare, building a healthier, affordable future. So in particular, I will just tell you how the Office of PSA, which is given the task of providing strategic direction to science policy and science advice to some of the key policies. And this is done by two instruments. One of the instrument is Prime Minister Science, Technology and Innovation Advisory Council, PM STIC, and the other one is Empowered Technology Group, which I will not talk today. So this council is mandated to assess the status of various science and technology related matters, comprehend challenges, formulate interventions, and develop a futuristic roadmap and advise the Prime Minister accordingly. This, in the last few years, we have done the deliberations and we have launched 9 missions so far, which have been rolled out. Some of the important mission is like AI mission, which was launched last year with an outlay of almost 11,000 crore. This is run by MITI. Deep Ocean mission with Ministry of Earth Science, Semiconductor mission by MITI, Green Hydrogen mission by MNRE, and many other things. And recent mission, which has relevance to the health, is the One Health mission, which has been launched very recently, where ICMR is the lead. I'll say a few things on that. And the one which is launched last year on a very critical and emerging technology called quantum technologies, which is really important for strategic autonomy of a country. This has been launched. And the other missions in the pipeline, which I have written on the right side, but I'll show you one slide on a cell and gene therapy effort to be enhanced in coming years. So this audience doesn't have to be shown this slide because you are all plugged into it in more than one ways. So we all know that COVID-19 has taught even the common person on the street that we need to look at the One Health approach, where human beings are not isolated. They are in complete interaction with animals and the environment. And we need to look at the whole holistic approach, which I have shown in the slide, to really see what the solutions are for making sure that if the next pandemic comes, I hope not, we are well prepared. So this is a very unique mission which was launched last year. It does not mean that these efforts were not going on in different ministries, but what we found out was there were gaps and the interconnections between various ministries. So One Health mission involves 12 ministries and also involves states. So far, 2 states are on board, Gujarat and Karnataka, and another 16 states have expressed interest to be a part of this. So this is done. There is an executive steering committee chaired by Honorable Health Minister and co-chaired by PSA, me, and there is a scientific steering committee which is chaired by PSA and secretaries of all these departments. So we have all the players like NGOs, private sector, multilateral organizations, academic institutes, international bodies like G20, and so on. So this was launched last year, and as you know, there is a One Health Institute which was dedicated by Honorable Prime Minister to nation last year. So the construction has started. This institute is in Nagpur, and ICMR is the nodal agency. So this mission will look at integrated disease surveillance, joint outbreak response to control disease at the source, pandemic preparedness in terms of disaster resilience, mock exercises, compensation mechanisms, and so on, and enabling activities, which is again very important across data, regulatory, and governance mechanism. So it has a lot of technology needs for the One Health mission. Some of it I have just indicated. We need to look at targeted R&D for vaccines, diagnostics, and therapeutics. We need to have a nimble stockpile management system. We need tools for linking local outbreaks to the information system. We need sentinel surveillance based on genomics, integrating information, GIA-based tools, federated data, and analytics. All these are integral to One Health mission. And for all this have been done now in the mission under 4 advisory groups, and the work is on. And I'm happy to say that Dr. Sanjay Jodpede is member of one of the groups on surveillance, I guess. The first meeting recently happened, and we had a very detailed presentation by Dr. N.K. Arora on what has been outlined. So this is an effort in the last few months. It is going very well. So first thing what we did, there are 22 BSL-3 labs in different ministries. So all of them have been now networked for cross-sector disease outbreak investigation. And in states have been now involved. 18 of them have expressed. 2 are members of this executive council. And the first national pandemic preparedness mock drill, Vishanu Yuddha Abhyas, was held in August 24. And this Abhyas, this mock drill, gave us very, very important messages on how we have to be prepared for the next pandemic. And the next one, which is the Bird Sanctuary Wetland Project for Surveillance at Bird-Human Interface, is going to be done soon this month, and so on. I will request you, we have a news magazine which we call Vigyan Dhara from our office, and this month's issue is on One Health. I think my office might have sent a copy to you can circulate. It looks at what is happening, how the states are doing it, and so on. So our office effort is to really keep this integration of this 12 ministries and departments and make sure that the gaps are filled. And One Health activities are also happening along with G20.
In the world we live in,
This
the
is
health of people,
I will not show this
animals,
video. This is on
and
One Health.
environment
I will
are closely connected.
excuse myself
When one is at risk,
on our website. But just to tell you that this BSL-3 labs are already on the map, on our dashboard. And we are now looking at how do we make SOPs for really looking at the usage of these labs, which are in different ministries. Some of them for animal, humans, and environment. And we must make sure that they are available at the nearest point when there is an outbreak, and not really that you have to travel across the country, the samples. Second one, in One Health mission we discussed is the focus drive for cell and gene therapy. Many of you are experts here. This is something where India is at a very nascent stage. India has only 2 approved CAR T cell products by ImmunoAct and Immunil. as compared to 430 products in US and many other in European countries. And this is what we need. So these rare diseases are not so rare actually. It's almost 10% of this, and it's a heavy burden because this CAR T cell therapies cost something like 4 to 5 crores. I think for David Heyman, he can convert to dollars. It's a large amount, almost $500,000, which is unaffordable in our conditions. Even in developed countries, it's not a very viable option. And our goal is in this mission, which is being formulated, to reduce the cost and bring to few lakhs. Tall challenge. Already these two companies, two things have come, which have already reduced the cost at experimental stage, but much more needs to be done. So this is something, again, all of the people felt that we need to improve our drug regulatory system. This is something a country has to have, a very efficient drug regulatory system. CIDCO, as you know, CIDSCO is involved. And we had a very brainstorming session in PM style. Based on that, many things have been done in the last 8 months. They have strengthened the inspection, streamlining coordination across multiple agencies, issuing clear guidelines across areas, and simplifying the reviewing system. Still, a lot more work has to be done, and Kaizen has been onboarded to improve CIDSCO internal processes. So this is very important for our country, because we need to make sure these regulatory mechanisms don't choke the system. And our office is helping to develop a digital architecture for something like the UPI, but I'm sure Mr. Ramdurai will appreciate more than anyone, because he has been the architect of many of this architecture. We would like a digital drug regulatory system which brings all the stakeholders on the same platform for crosstalk. For example, import, export, labs, procurement and supply chain, stakeholders, organizations involved in certificate approval and standardization, as well as other agencies which I have listed on this busy slide. But our goal is registration, approval, post-approval changes, import, export related, license approvals, enforcement, inspection, and other stages must be involved in the complete life cycle. And we would like to have this dashboard at the earliest. And this is what the work is on. AI, there can't be a day when you don't talk of AI. Our office is heavily involved. Many of you must be involved. AI is here to stay in all walks of life. And healthcare is not left out. Healthcare itself has AI innovations in all these sectors which I have written, which is a subset of many other things possible, be it rare disease diagnostic, drug development, cancer research already happening in many places, medical diagnosis, virtual nursing, gene editing, health monitoring and wearables, and personalized healthcare. All this is happening in AI, and this is where we need to take a leapfrog way, that this becomes a part and parcel of our health system. India AI mission, which is run by MITI at a cost of almost 11,000 crores, has done all the due diligence. Our office has been involved in formulating this. It has created compute capacity. It will have applications, startup financing, data sets which you need to train the models. Large language models are being developed in India. These are not only the open source LLMs, but to be developed in India, future skills and safe and trusted AI. So this is all happening. And the good news is that the Ministry of Education has also funded quite substantially 4 centers of excellence, one on healthcare, agriculture, sustainable cities, and education. So as we speak, these things are being rolled out, and there is a synergy between various ministries to make sure that we have minimal duplication. With this, I think I will thank you once again for this opportunity to share some of the things we have been doing. But as I mentioned, the purpose was to see if any of you would like to get connected with these efforts. We'll be more than happy. And I'm delighted to be here, especially when a stalwart like Professor Heyman is talking. So delighted to be here, and my privilege to be amongst you on this Foundation Day. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for your very insightful remarks. It is now time for the PHFI Foundation Day lecture. We are honored to have Professor David Heyman, who will deliver today's lecture on infectious diseases threats to health security, the paradigm shift required for a more secure future. Please join me in welcoming him once again with a very warm round of applause.
Is medical diagnosis, virtual nursing, gene editing.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be with you. Professor Zogbe, thank you very much for the kind invitation. It's really very interesting to me to see how Public Health Foundation of India has evolved over the years. It's very important. And I remember when I started at the Center for Disease Control in the US in the 1970s, one of the first things we learned was that every outbreak needs a reliable face. And certainly PHFI was that reliable face here in India during the COVID pandemic. I'm also very pleased to be with all of you, many of you colleagues for many, many years, in fact. And I was very interested in seeing the many excellent technical presentations that were given, but also the skills and the talent that's in the Public Health Foundation family at the Utsav last evening. It was very, very interesting to see how you can dance, you can sing, you can tell stories. And fortunately, I won't be doing that because that's not my strength. I'll be talking about infectious diseases, but thank you very much for having invited me to come. So what I was asked to speak about is infectious disease threats to health security. And certainly there was nothing in recent history more important than the COVID-19 pandemic. In fact, as you know, there were over 7 million reported deaths, cumulative deaths from this to the 30th of March of this year. And in addition, there was an excess mortality estimates during COVID-19 up to 36 million. So there were very many deaths that occurred from this pandemic, but they were small in comparison to the population of the world, but still they disrupted the world. And here in India, it's estimated that there are between 2.7 to 3.4 million estimated deaths, which included indirect death ranges in that total. And of course, as I said, PHFI was the honest face during this pandemic. But what did we know before the pandemic, and could it have been prevented? And I'd like to just show you some slides which may help convince you that it might have been prevented. First of all, we know that there are emerging infections that occur regularly, and these many times come from the animal kingdom, starting in 1976 with Ebola, which seems to be the poster child of emerging infections, through to the current outbreaks of influenza A, H7N9. Now, when these emerge, when these infections emerge, when they breach the barrier between animals and humans, or back between humans and animals, there are three possible pathways. One is no further transmission. Think of rabies. A dog bites a child or an adult, that child develops rabies, and there's no further transmission unless there's an organ transplant. Another emergence continues transmission for a time, and then it stops, disappears, and it may reoccur. Ebola H5N1, many infections which cause small outbreaks, but then don't become endemic. They disappear to reoccur. And then there are those that continue transmission and become endemic. Think of HIV in the 20th century. So the emergence can lead to three different pathways, and these are really not known at the time when emergence is first identified. So what did we know? We also knew that human coronaviruses infect humans. There are 4 endemic human coronaviruses. There were before 2019. And you can see that they came from either a bat or some type of rodent into an intermediary animal and then into humans. Now I'd like to focus on this one type of coronavirus, human coronavirus OC43. And I focus on this because a study done by Vigen et al. In Belgium actually suggests a hypothesis that's very important. What these colleagues did was to examine all the known specimens of human coronavirus OC43 and all the specimens of bovine human coronavirus OC43, which is thought to have been the source in humans. By doing a molecular tree analysis, looking forward, calculating the mutation rate, and going backwards, these were all considered to have been closely resembling the bovine virus at that time, between 1850 and 1900. In fact, in 1889, there was a pandemic, which was called the influenza. However, there were 1 million deaths worldwide, and there were neurological symptoms which are not consistent with influenza. Of course, there are no specimens available at present, or were not present, to examine these specimens. But what these colleagues in Belgium hypothesized is that this was the emergence of human coronavirus, OC43, that it emerged from a common bovine ancestor in the late 1880s. And as population immunity developed, this became one of the 4 endemic coronaviruses which caused the common cold. Now, there were 2 additional coronavirus emergence that occurred in 2003 and 2012, as you know. In 2003, it was the SARS coronavirus 1. And this was a one-time mutation, either in an animal or in a human that was infected. And then it was able to transmit from human to human, and it spread around the world. The outbreak began in the Guangdong province of China in 2002, sometime around the 15th of November. And what you can see in this slide is that it continued at a small pace, infecting humans here and there until it became an infection of healthcare workers. And healthcare workers then inadvertently amplified transmission in health facilities and also into the community. And one of the doctors who was treating these patients, as you remember, came out of the Guangdong province into Hong Kong. He was going to a wedding in Hong Kong, and he stayed one night in a hotel in Hong Kong. That was enough to transmit the unknown virus at that point to people who stayed on the same hotel floor. And what you can see here is the doctor's room in green, and the blue is people who returned either to places in Hong Kong, to Singapore, or to other places around the world. And a month later, after the etiology had been identified, again in Hong Kong, they were able to find PCR scrapings on the carpet in front of this doctor's room where he stayed one night, and also in front of the lifts. This outbreak spread around the world, and there were outbreaks in many different countries. And again, it was healthcare workers who amplified transmission. Index B is a healthcare worker who inadvertently infected other healthcare workers, visitors, patients, her own husband, and many others. So amplification of emerging infections is the way that outbreaks begin and can then spread. These were a series of epidemics throughout the world. There were about 8,100 confirmed infections, and 10% of those were deaths. And the outbreak came to a close very rapidly because there was a world that worked together back then. Gro Harlem Brundtland, the Director General of WHO at that time, was a former prime minister and a pediatrician, and she was very direct in what needed to be done, communicating freely to the world and the world following her advice. This infection did not become endemic, but the last human infections were in research laboratory accidents in Singapore, in Taiwan, and in China. As far as anyone understands, this virus is now gone from nature, but it does still exist in laboratories. There was research done by the Chinese after the outbreak, and that research was very important. This is research in the Guangdong province where the outbreak was thought to have begun. And what they found was that 80% of animals in one of the animal markets had antibody, which they thought was SARS coronavirus, but in the end, it was a SARS-related antibody. And at the same time, there were examinations being done in market workers, live market workers, and in communities around those markets. And 13% of the animal traders and 3% of those in the communities were infected. Now, public health would say that this evidence needs to be translated into research, and educating animal traders in live animal markets is one of the first things that needs to be done. Second, general populations need to be educated. And third, it would be wonderful if a vaccine could be developed that would protect the wild animals who are raised on farms, in China, in order that they wouldn't transmit infection in the future to humans. But the government did what many other governments do around the world. They made it temporarily illegal to sell wild animals. This, in fact, drove the animal trade underground. And a student that I had at the London School, a Chinese student, was doing her PhD and was able to go to any community in the Guangdong province and find where she could buy those animals underground. So the political decision was the wrong decision, but it's the decision that many of our political leaders make. And we as public health experts need to help them understand that this is not the way forward. Then in 2012, a SARS-like respiratory syndrome was identified in Saudi Arabia. This is Dr. Zaki, who identified a patient who he thought had SARS coronavirus 1, or SARS. He saw the patient, he took a specimen, had it sequenced, and he found that it wasn't the SARS coronavirus 1, but was very similar. And he published this information immediately on the World Wide Web. He was from Egypt. He was asked to leave Saudi Arabia after he did that because Saudi Arabia had not intended to report it at that time. However, we now know that MERS coronavirus emerged in 2012 from camels or dromedaries, and this is the initial outbreaks. And you can see that they occurred mainly in small groupings. It wasn't a disease which was transmitting easily from person to person. But it did spread in people who were infected to other countries throughout the world. And in 2015, it arrived in South Korea. And where there was poor infection prevention and control in health facilities, one person infected people in 3 health facilities, who then went on to cause a major outbreak, over 200 infections and 30-some deaths. A very important outbreak, which was rapidly rectified by strengthening infection prevention and control. MERS coronavirus continues occasionally to reemerge or to emerge in populations in the Middle East. And the virus is present in camels and dromedaries in the Middle East, but also in sub-Saharan Africa, where there have not been any emergence as far as is known. But this was a disease which spread throughout the world as well. And we now understand that it's very difficult to transmit person to person, but it does transmit in hospital settings where there's poor infection control and in close family contacts. This disease is now endemic in camels in the Middle East and Africa, and there are occasional human infections, but it's not endemic in humans. And the questions still remain as to what are the practices that facilitate camel to human transmission. It's known camels carry the virus in their nasal passage. It's known that infection prevention and control can stop outbreaks from occurring. And this is what's going on in Saudi Arabia and in other countries where this emerges regularly to make sure there aren't major outbreaks. And then there was COVID-19, again, an outbreak which occurred, which we were not well prepared for. This is now endemic in humans worldwide, and animal reservoirs may be developing. As you'll remember, minks and mink farms in Europe, Denmark in fact, the animals became infected. They then reinfected humans with a mutated strain. And so the question is, are animal reservoirs being developed? Now, emerging infections have been a concern for many, many centuries. And this shows you back in 1665 in the UK, reporting of plague deaths, and then deaths of males and females from smallpox, cholera, and yellow fever. And the first known attempt to stop these diseases at borders occurred in Venice in the 14th century when there was ship quarantine for plague only. That ship quarantine kept the ships in the harbor for 40 days, not knowing what caused plague, but knowing that if the ship stayed there, the rodents and humans who might have been infected would no longer be alive, or they would know that there was plague on the ship and it would not be permitted to enter. This was, as you know, not extremely effective, and land borders were also areas where plague could enter. Then in the 19th and 20th century, after the development of the transatlantic cable for communication on telegraph between the US or North America and Europe, there were a series of treaties or international conferences on cholera, plague, yellow fever, and smallpox. And countries agreed among themselves that if they had a person or had an outbreak of one of these four infections, they would send a telegram or a telegraph to all the other countries that were signatories of the treaty in order that they could begin to quarantine if people came into their country from one of the countries that reported the outbreak. This then evolved through the League of Nations into the International Health Regulations in Geneva in 1969. Those regulations had to do with international travel and trade. They wanted to guarantee that there would be maximum protection against the international spread of infectious diseases and minimal interruption of international travel and trade. What they did was they required that there be some type of a health organization at borders, organizing health, public health, so that vectors could not proliferate. At the same time, countries were required by the international health regulations, without enforcement, but required to report one of these four infections. And there were health measures expected if indeed a country did report. This is how they worked at the borders. And you can see the spraying in the airlines, and you can see also the rat guard. And when a country did report an infection, this is yellow fever in this case, it was published in the weekly epidemiological record of WHO. And if countries were seeing this, they could then implement the maximum measures permitted under the international health regulations. For yellow fever, this was requirement of the vaccination certificate when people entered the country, coming from the country that had reported. But you can see the difficulty in a world where there are many international connections of airlines and a whole series of things, which obscures where the passengers really began. But the regulations required that there be certain measures at borders in order to make sure that diseases were stopped at borders. Well, public health people have known since 1969 and way before that disease cannot be stopped at borders. Our political leaders did not quite understand that at that point in time. And so the regulations were voluntary reporting by countries, publication of the epidemic, and then application of predetermined measures such as the yellow fever vaccination certificate. So health security up to the 21st century was really only trying to stop disease at borders through requirements listed in the international health regulations. The SARS outbreak in 2002-2003 alerted political leaders that in fact disease could cross borders, and it could cross borders while still in the incubation period. This resulted in the revision of the international health regulations from 4 diseases to all public health threats, from passive to proactive surveillance, and from control at borders to detection and containment at source. And that last is the most important, as you'll see. So the regulations still have to do with international traffic and trade, making sure that there are measures that permit this to continue. But at the same time, at the center of this is strengthened national core capacity for surveillance and control. It's no longer report the disease, stop it, or try to stop it at borders. It's detect the disease and respond where and when it occurs. And so this strengthened national core capacity for surveillance and control is very important. And countries that have it can really have an effect. This is Japan during the COVID-19 pandemic. They not only did contact tracing forward, but they did investigation backwards, and they found where infection was occurring, and they did lockdowns of those areas. So in this instance, it was nightclubs. They did not lock down their entire borders. At the same time, South Korea, when there was an outbreak among attendees at a church, investigated the outbreak, stopped the outbreak, and COVID-19 entered in both of these countries, but entered at a much less overwhelming pace. And as a result, the mortality rates that occurred in these countries was much less than those countries which figured highest on the preparedness scale that was established by WHO. So WHO now requires countries under the IHR to develop their core capacities, and they report this each year through the IHR states parties self-reporting system, so that you can tell the IHR score per capacity in WHO regions and individual countries. So health security after the IHR revision includes strong public health and detection, risk assessment, and response. Now, there's also a part of the international health regulations which continues mandatory reporting. But this is not of specific diseases as such. It's about potential public health emergencies of international importance. Countries are required to report a potential emergency to WHO using this decision tree, which was developed at the Karolinska Institute by Johan Giesecke in Sweden, which permits countries to determine whether or not they should be reporting an outbreak. Sometimes it's if the disease occurs by name, or many times if the disease fits this decision tree. Just to show you how this works, Zika was a neurological disorder that was causing microcephaly. And the question was, is this a public health emergency? It was known that there were clusters of microcephaly in Brazil, and it was known that these were occurring where Zika, which was a benign infection in humans, was occurring as well. And so the Brazilians looked at the decision tree and they decided, yes, this was an event that had the potential to spread. They also found that it was very unusual that there would be clusters of microcephaly. And as followed the decision tree, they were to report the event to WHO, which they did. This is an emergency committee that WHO established, which listened to what Brazil had to present and decided that indeed this was a public health emergency of international concern. So instead of just countries reporting, there's a whole change in the way infectious disease reporting occurs today. It's not by disease usually, it's by public health emergency of international concern. There's a decision tree analysis and there's a collaborative response. This, however, did not work so well, as you'll know, during the SARS outbreaks or the COVID-19 outbreaks. Countries were not so willing to work together. But in the revision, there was a fake safety net for people if the disease should escape. And then during the COVID pandemic, there was a collapse of health systems in many countries. This is COVID-19 in Italy, an emergency tent set up for the intensive care that patients required because the hospital could no longer accept them. And as we know what happened here in India with the scarcity of oxygen and the problems that occurred during the COVID pandemic here. And in the United States and the United Kingdom, that failed resilience has been documented as having caused excess deaths other than those reported by COVID-19. On this graph, you can see the gray shaded area, which is what was anticipated for excess deaths. You can see the COVID deaths in the hashed area, and then in the clear brown area, those excess deaths, which occurred because many times people could not obtain the health care they needed. At the same time, in the UK, there's a huge backlog of patients, which continues today, that they just cannot get removed because of the backlog that created during the pandemic. And the estimated deaths here in the pandemic were also quite high, 0.4 to 1.3 million estimated deaths over and above those that would have occurred normally. So resilient healthcare with surge capacity and continuity of healthcare is also very important as a health security measure, as a measure that we must convince our political leaders is important. And finally, this is the outcome of patients with comorbidities in the United States. And you can see that underlying health conditions were the major factor for death that occurred in people who were infected with COVID-19. And in India, it's the same. 96% of deaths were recorded as having comorbidities, and you know better than me the comorbidities that existed in India. So health security must also include healthy populations that resist serious outcomes from infection. And finally, we know that there are many infections which can amplify in transmission and spread, and we need to make sure that we're working together in the animal, human, and environmental sectors, as Professor Sood discussed with us earlier today. So this is the new paradigm. This is health security today. It's no longer attempt to stop disease at borders. It's a whole series of measures that will make us prepared for the next pandemic when it occurs. And we need to make sure that all of these are working in synergy in countries. But is it possible to prevent emerging infections at the source? Because we're all public health people, that's really what we want to do. And I just go to the Swiss cheese model, which many of you know, which was developed by James Reason in the BMJ. And what Reason said was that if you want to pass an arrow through 4 pieces of Swiss cheese, you must line up the holes. And so in lining up the holes for emergency, for public health issues, those holes represent the risk factors and the emerging infection occurs. Now, a good example of this is in Sudan, where there's, this was back in the year 2000 when it was still one country. And one of the major exports were ruminant animals at times of religious festivals across the Red Sea. Now, in East Africa, there's Rift Valley fever, which is an infection which is reservoired in wild ruminant animals, transmitted from animal to animal by mosquitoes, the Anopheles, and to domestic animals as well. And eventually, it can be transmitted to humans, either by the blood of an infected animal or by a mosquito. And then outbreaks can occur in humans. Now, there's a vaccine in East Africa that's made in Kenya, which prevents Rift Valley fever in humans, in animals. But there was insufficient veterinary vaccine production and use in the 1990s. And at the same time, there was climate change, which causes flooding. And that flooding causes animals and humans to live more closely together. And it also causes increase in mosquitoes. And as a result, there was a major outbreak of Rift Valley fever in East Africa due to all of these different factors. The trade across the Red Sea into Yemen and Saudi Arabia, some of it legal, which requires vaccination of ruminants, some illegal, caused outbreaks in Saudi Arabia and Yemen the first time in history. This disease is now endemic in animals in the Arabian Peninsula. The immediate response has to be mitigation response, and it's costly. You must spray households, you must get bed nets, and you must educate mothers. So in this instance, unvaccinated ruminants, flooding, and an El Nino event, animals and humans, and susceptible populations caused the emergence of a major outbreak. Now, To stop this outbreak, you must interrupt any one of these figures. And that's what the Swiss cheese model tells us. So vaccine production could have been increased, could have prevented the outbreaks. Better negotiations on climate change and more rapid discussions, including health, could make a difference in the long term. And the World Trade Organization can do a lot also to prevent these diseases from spreading. But prevention of emergence is really an innovation. And I'm going to close with just showing you an innovation which has occurred in this part of the world. And it's involved with an encephalitis which occurred among pig farmers in Malaysia in 1998 and 1999. This, in fact, was an outbreak that was thought to be Japanese encephalitis. In Malaysia, there were 265 cases, 105 deaths, mainly in farmers of swine, pig farmers, and in slaughterhouses where pigs were being slaughtered. And at the same time, there were some cases in Singapore. It was thought to be Japanese encephalitis carried by pigs in this area. But in discovery at the university in Malaysia, they identified a new virus. This was a paramyxovirus, very similar to the Hendra virus, and they named it the Nipah virus. And because the Hendra virus is carried by fruit bats, the idea was that this was probably also carried by fruit bats. It was infecting domesticated swine, which are grown for food in parts of Malaysia. And then it was either infecting the pig farmers or the slaughter of pigs. Then, as you know, there were outbreaks in West Bengal and in Bangladesh. And in these outbreaks, it was very difficult to identify any contact with swine, and it was not in farmers. So it was understood that this virus could transmit from human to human. And it cost the economy of Malaysia $582 million, which was the only economic analysis that's been done, at least to date. But the changing epidemiology was first suspected in 2001 here in India. Then human-to-human transmission was expected again in 2003, 5, and 7 in Bangladesh. And no cases could be linked to direct pig exposure. It was known that fruit bats carried the Nipah virus, and there was one potential exposure. And this was a Dr. Islam, who in investigating outbreaks and talking with patients, found that one person could have been exposed to bat guano or bat excreta, and that was a palm sap collector. And you know the palm sap collectors in this part of the world and in sub-Saharan Africa as well, they score the palm tree in order to have the flow of sap, which is then collected in a clay pot, and you can see the clay pot on this picture. That clay pot then is under the scored area, and overnight, the palm sap begins to ferment. In the morning, it's then sold ready to drink. And so Dr. Islam made the hypothesis that it was fruit bats infecting the palm sap, and that palm sap was then infecting humans. So a very important study was done where there was a 24-hour camera put in the top of a palm tree. And what you can see here is the cord which is holding the container, collecting the palm sap, and you can see the bat. Now, in watching this overnight, it was seen that there was a possibility that infection did occur. Some of you may have seen this video before. It's a very important video. And some of you may have seen what happened when the bat turned upright. But if not, I'll show you again because actually it showed that the risk was plausible. If you watch when the bat turns upright, you'll see that it urinates just over the pot where the palm sap is being collected. So this is real innovation in public health. And afterwards, Dr. Islam went on and investigated further clusters of the disease and found that 8 of those who had died drank palm sap regularly and 6 provided care to an infected patient in the home or hospital. Now, the decision was made in Bangladesh in discussions with the government, which wanted to make it illegal to sell palm sap, that the community agriculture people could help by showing in a One Health way that covering those containers could stop outbreaks. And so those containers are now covered in a way that the bats cannot infect the palm sap. And there are very few outbreaks that are occurring. But here in India, you've had many, many more outbreaks. You've had outbreaks in the south, and those outbreaks have not been costed out, but there are certainly extreme public health expenditures, lost productivity, and short-term local economic disruptions. And Nipah virus can occur in all these parts that are yellow on the slide where the bat reservoir exists. And so the challenge to PHFI is to do the research to understand the unique Swiss cheese model for emergence of Nipah virus in India and innovation to translate that understanding into prevention. And so we've seen that health security has evolved over the centuries. It's evolved into not just attempts to stop disease at borders, but a whole series of other activities. And working together in the animal, human, and environmental sectors, we need to prevent emergence in the future. So thank you for having listened. Thanks to all of you for your excellent presentations. And I'd like to give a special thanks to Gaurav and to Anuj, who helped me get these slides on the screen, and also to Jasmine, who brought me here. So thank you very much, Professor Zogte. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Heyman, for a truly enlightening and inspiring lecture. We are grateful for your presence and for the depth of knowledge you brought to today's occasion. Your insights have not only informed, but also inspired further thought and dialogue. We now open the floor for audience interaction, a chance for you to engage directly with our esteemed speaker, seek clarifications, or share your reflections inspired by his lecture. I would like to invite Dr. Raj Shankar Ghosh, Senior Advisor, PHFI, to moderate the audience interaction.
So this is now open for questions, but I think once again, on behalf of the audience, I'd really like to thank you, Professor Heyman, for us, who are students of public health, this excellent evidence-based narrative that you presented of the evolution of health security across regulations, control measures, and country preparedness we remember for long. Thank you so much for this. Now this is open for questions. Please introduce yourself and ask the question. One question that I will have is that when we were hearing from you about how the countries have prepared and what we could have done to prevent, one frustration that we had during the COVID times was about the inequitable distribution of resources, and whether for our future preparedness, at least to reduce the impact, whether we can prepare our systems for more equitable distribution of resources so that the impact is not such disproportionate between populations. But I will now invite questions from Dr. Pushkar. And Dr. Rajiv Ten.
Hi, David. Always such an honor to hear you and see you after such a long time. I love that carrying forward what Dr. Rajchandra Ghosh said. What you mentioned was resilient health systems, surge capacity, and continuity of routine initiatives and activities. And polio and COVID gave us great learnings with regard to that. So my question to you is, has this aspect been modeled and has cost effectiveness studies been done on this? So this really sort of acts as the mainstay of any infectious control prevention.
Thank you for the question. In fact, I've been surprised, and I think many of you have been as well, how the research that needs to be done does not seem to be being done rapidly enough. Whether that's because people are just wanting to get on with life after a terrible pandemic, or whether it's taking too long, or whether there are no resources. But the studies that need to be done, the economic studies, the modeling that shows why health security must include resilience and healthy populations and strong surveillance and response. Why that hasn't been done, I don't know. I can't. I can say that I'm very disappointed in my country where resources have been decreased when they need to be increased to do that type of research.
Thank you,
Maybe colleagues from PHFI could answer what they're doing, because I'm sure there is going on.
Thank you for that last question. My question is actually from
Could
your
you introduce
experience.
yourself?
Oh,
and then,
okay.
yeah,
I'm
please.
Sandra Albert from the Indian Institute of Public Health in Shillong. That's from the Northeast region of India. I think you've heard of some of our sessions yesterday. So one thing that, well, we did and probably not do it in a great manner was lockdowns, and how we kind of did it with a broad stroke, using it as a tool across the country at the same time. What would be your lessons from Britain as well as elsewhere, how we could actually use this in a better, more informed way, using COVID as a lesson? And what really should we be doing as an organization to kind of draw those lessons so that we don't really make some of those errors we potentially did in the uniform kind of application rather than in a more staggered, potentially better staggered, more appropriate way?
Thanks for that question. I think it was very surprising to all of us to see borders shut down at the time of the pandemic. In Europe, they did it because their hospitals were overwhelmed. They hadn't done what had been done in Singapore, South Korea, and in places where they were rapidly onto it and slowed its transmission. So by the time Europe and then North America saw it, it was too late. So they closed down their borders, which was quite surprising, following the Chinese example, rather than the example of Asians, which were investigating, stopping outbreaks or decreasing transmission in outbreaks, and doing intermittent lockdown of sectors where transmission was occurring. Schools were never closed in many countries in Asia because transmission was not occurring. Evidence-based information is very important. So whether or not in the next pandemic we will have learned is not clear. But certainly closing down a border, we all know, cannot stop. So countries that should have known better and did what they shouldn't do. And unfortunately, many other countries have followed. Countries in sub-Saharan Africa, where there weren't so many deaths occurring, where it was a disease of young people left behind. Many of them closed down because that's what they did.
Thank you. Dr. Devendra Kandai, please.
Hi, David. Thanks for such a master class in infectious disease. And I remember my days and I had a privilege of being with you in Bihar during polio eradication days. It was just an honor. You mentioned multiple steps that need to be taken by a country to prevent such against the health security and prevent such outbreak. I just wanted to know from your experience that multiple countries have to come together as a team. So are there lessons from your vast experience how the countries can come together for addressing this issue collectively?
I look at the international health regulations and the reporting as a vestige of the past. Because when they were developed, WHO had exclusive rights to the information. No one else had. WHO did the risk assessment. WHO told countries what to do. In COVID-19, all the information was available in front of the paywalls of all the medical journals and in pre-publications. And so countries set up their own advisory groups. They did their own risk assessment, and they didn't really feel they needed WHO's risk assessment. They were making their own decisions. So where does that leave the IHR, international regulations, or WHO? It leaves them in an area that they can provide guidance, but not dictate what should be done. And that's many times a misunderstanding. The WHO says this, and you must do it. It's unique in SARS 2003, a very strong political directive led forward rather than waiting for countries to tell them what to do. So this was a unique situation. Today, countries prefer to do their own risk assessment, and they have the information to do it. It's not exclusive to WHO. The WHO has to find a role, and it will.
Dr. Marlon.
Dilip Mavadankar, former director of Indian Institute of Public Health, Gandhinagar. One intriguing feature of the COVID, which I saw in the city of Ahmedabad and to some extent Bombay, that in the slums of these cities where the density is very high, there is no social distancing, there is no mask, no sanitation possible, the mortality is very low. It's not well studied. Dharavi is documented, but other than that, it's not well studied. So what is the hypothesis? Why the poor people didn't die? Because it was thought that there will be great mortality, but very little mortality.
You know, I think that's a good research question, but certainly the comorbidities that were serious for COVID-19 were occurring in those populations who have money, especially in the obese. In fact, in the UK, at 1.80% of deaths in those who were obese. We just couldn't live. And so it's a very good question, and it's one that should be examined. But I expect that they have fewer comorbidities, even though they are less well nourished. They had fewer comorbidities. That's why we need to really, or become the guy. That's why we really need better health promotion.
Just one,
Thank you.
one hypothesis, is there possibility that they have so many other infections going around that they have a lot more immunity against infections than the middle class or upper middle class populations?
Certainly that's the case with diseases such as polio, where the populations that have good sanitation are at greater risk than those who don't.
Thank you. Professor Deep.
Thank you. I'm Professor Sanjay Deep from IIT Delhi. I'm in the Department of Management Studies, and I work in the area of technology and public health. And we have started this UEI initiative with Dr. Ghosh, where we are working for the past 5 years in public health. And thank you so much for the excellent lecture, Professor David. We have been following your work for the past 5 years. I've been writing papers and citing you in terms of your contributions. But today, Dr. Ajay also mentioned, my question is regarding your excellent presentation, that probably you were showing some of the aspects of the systems thinking that we need to do when we are talking about the infectious disease. And Dr. Ajay already talked about the Center of Excellence. IIT Delhi is one of the Center of Excellence where I'm the part of the core faculty member for the healthcare, along with aims that we are trying to help. My question is that how do we actually make sure that these collaborative models, and you have described that very beautifully in your lecture, between the AI experts and epidemiologists like you, as well as the policymakers, make sure that there is a huge impact on the health systems rather than having impact for the commercial benefits. And this is what I've been seeing for the past 5 years. So maybe your views, being an expert in epidemiology, how do you look at this collaborative models between the technologists, public health experts, as well as the policymakers, please?
It's a good question, and I think at the base of all this is behavior change. I heard Sandra and others talk about behavior change as being possible. And once behavior change occurs, then we can deal better with all of these diseases and all of these outbreaks. Outbreaks don't need to be amplified in transmission. They're amplified because of health worker behavior, because of behavior of others. And so we need to really link behavior change and understand how behaviors can be changed, and link that with AI with a whole series of other interventions, which will ensure healthier populations and more resistance to infection.
Thank you. Thank you. So I think we have a real gender imbalance in terms of the questions who are asking. So I will give a turn to Dr. Monica now before we ask anyone.
Thank you so much, Dr. David Heyman. I am a person who works in infectious, not non-infectious diseases, so non-communicable diseases. I am Vice President of Research and Health Promotion at Public Health Foundation of India. So during COVID, we did hear a lot about herd immunity. And a lot of decisions were also made around whether India is reaching herd immunity and we may not require lockdowns. So what is the epidemiology around it? And not just for COVID, for other infectious diseases, does the herd immunity concept really work?
The herd immunity concept works if the vaccine prevents infection, or if disease prevents future infection. If it doesn't, then in fact herd immunity can't be created with population immunity. And so with COVID-19, as you know, the vaccine did not prevent against infection. It prevented against serious illness once infection occurred. And so population immunity did develop, like it has developed for the other 4 endemic coronaviruses. And I would anticipate that now, moving forward, population immunity will continue to suppress serious illness, COVID-19, unless there's a major shift in its viral structure. And so herd immunity could not be obtained. It was obtained here in India for polio. It has been obtained for smallpox worldwide. So it can be attained and it can stop transmission, but only if it's a vaccine that prevents infection. And I think we all learned that vaccines don't always prevent infection, which I certainly believed before the pandemic that vaccines were to prevent infection. And in fact, if you look at the influenza vaccine, it probably doesn't prevent infection, it prevents serious illness. And so what we're seeing is that vaccines that prevent infection can be used to cause herd immunity, but those that don't.
Dr. Himanshu, please, Professor Himanshu.
Good evening, Professor Heyman. I'm Professor Himanshu Negandhi. I work as Director of Academics at the Public Health Foundation of India. It was a pleasure listening to your talk. In this part of the world, we are stretched in the availability of trained human resources, and we are investing a lot in capacity strengthening for human resources. How do you visualize technology and AI actually playing a role in how we respond to pandemics or epidemics in this part of the world?
You know, I heard some presentations today about the importance of communities. And I think, as I think back to what happened in the pandemic in the countries in the United Kingdom, Wales seemed to have done a very important job in mobilizing volunteers in the community to work on contact tracing and a whole series of things. And now they have a roster of those people. And they keep that roster, and they have regular exercises which bring them into the exercise in order that they can be better prepared. AI learning and a whole series of other activities could certainly be important in that. But again, I think we've learned that communities are where the activity must occur in order to really detect, respond immediately, and respond with the confidence of people in the community. UK spent over 31 billion pounds on contact tracing centrally. It doesn't work. It must be done at the community level where there's trust.
Thank you. Dr. Salim Kesar.
Thank you, I don't want to bother David because we will discuss few things afterwards. Can I bother you, Professor Su? Can I ask questions? Yes, if I'm entitled, then, but it's related one in sense that whatever we have seen and experienced COVID-related pandemic and its response in our country, and what you are now doing on a very critical activity of One Health. Now, your presentation has brought out very clearly that there are 12 ministries and one very major component is the state. I think it should be reversed. The states who are going to be in driving seat and the central ministries will play a secondary role, even though it's important one, but secondary role. What is going to be the concept that you are planning so that we will not face another situation of COVID by the way of building capacity of the states to respond to such challenges? The health systems of the states at this juncture in the entire country aren't to that particular level. That's the ground reality. Thank you.
Actually, probably my diagram was schematic. State was one circle, one box, but actually it has 17 of those. Whereas the other ministries, which they are doing something in this field, for example, either for animal health or for wildlife or for human health. So they are very much part of this. And I can tell you that unless you involve the communities right to the panchayat level, it will not succeed. So recently, as I mentioned, 2 states have been brought in the council, Kerala, state of Kerala and state of Gujarat. And recently, I don't know if you had this presentation by state of Kerala. It is very good to see how they have involved at all administrative levels with the full command structure in place. And that is what is required. So the ministries which I mentioned, they are in some sector. For example, DBT, it has some role to play in making the disease modeling, data curation, and AI, which was mentioned, and so on. So various ministries are doing related things, but with some overlap. And states are really the ones where the prevention will happen. And their data is very critical. And they are very much part of it. So in One Health Mission, they are integral to it. And our effort is right from the beginning to make sure that we take them along. So there is no difference.
Thank you. My name is David Sando, Dr. David Sando from Tanzania, East Africa. And thank you, David and gentlemen, for very nice discussion. It's really a pleasure to attend the lecture, the topic that you've given, and it's really core to what we do. I come from, NGO world, but most of what we do is really supporting the government in managing some of these pandemic. I shout out. Yeah, so I think one of the lessons that we've learned from the COVID pandemic is the effect of our donor dependence and what actually happened when the North decided to each protect their resources and work on supporting their own health systems to the extent that the South, where we were more depending on their support both on technical side and financially, we were kept waiting, and we somehow were affected because of that dependence. And as we see now the future, the role of the global South in terms of South to South support and collaboration in addressing some of these health securities. I don't know, you see from the resume you worked in East Africa, and you come from areas where some of these health threats, such as Marburg, Mpox, they are common, and Ebola as well. And so it would be nice to hear from the experience. How do you see the future in terms of global South collaboration in addressing and system thinking and supporting, strengthening our health system in responding to these pandemics and outbreaks without or with less dependence from the.
I think that's a very important observation. And in fact, the world has become regional. And it's no longer someone sitting in Geneva that can deal with the problems that are in one region or another. It must be done regionally. And unfortunately for sub-Saharan Africa, there's now the African Union and the Africa Center for Disease Control, which has become a very strong partner to countries in the African region on developing the capacities in laboratories and the human capacities to really respond to outbreaks, and in fact, to advocate for getting vaccines into sub-Saharan Africa. So I think the world is regional. Regions have to be thinking how they can themselves become more self-sufficient in production of vaccines and many other issues. I'll just give an example of a vaccine technology transfer that occurred to develop a vaccine for meningitis A in sub-Saharan Africa. That vaccine was developed here in India. It was developed at the Serum Institute, and it was put on the market at 50 cents a dose, 50 US cents a dose. Countries in sub-Saharan Africa in the meningitis belt didn't buy that vaccine when it became available. They asked Gavi to develop an investment case. Gavi then developed a case, received the funds, provided that vaccine to countries. Countries were not willing to spend the money, 50 cents a dose, to vaccinate their children in the vaccine, in the meningitis belt, and they waited for an international donor to provide it. They could have purchased it in some countries, but they didn't. So I think there's been a flaw in development and providing without demanding. So if Gavi wants to provide, they must also demand. They must demand that countries, in this instance, provided some of the funding vaccine. So the whole development model must be changed. Why is there a pandemic emergency fund sitting at the World Bank in Washington, which makes the decisions in Washington about who can receive funds for preparedness? That's not the right way of preparing to compete countries. Countries need to have access to goods at a price they can afford, and they need to procure and develop themselves. So we still, even in the 21st century, are providing a top-down approach rather than the approach which is necessary. At the school where I teach, they call it a decolonization. Get countries to be demanders, not the North. I don't know if that answers the question here.
With apologies to many of you who have raised your hand, from the end will be available after this. You can always kind of
Thank you, Dr. Ghosh. Heman, you took me back to UCL days, and I was remembering my mentor taking the lecture, and that took me to a lecture which he had told us. And so there was a timeline that he showed, and the question was, does immunization really show the impact over a long period of time, when we saw that were there other factors that were actually that contributing to prevent the disease, or was that immunization? He also left us, to think and rethink. And that took me back to the COVID days when we were all panicked and doing things. Lots of vaccines came. Healthcare providers were the ones who had access to it. And many of us have received like a cocktail vaccine. I don't know about you all, but yes, in Belgaum we did. Whatever was available, we took. And so my question is, like you said, you have a decision making tree to answer your questions. In future, when something like this happens and then new vaccines are being produced, do we have now in place a decision-making tree whether we should or should not mix vaccines, and what would be the consequence or something like that? Because at that time, there were no guidelines. We knew that there are trials, and we were voluntarily participating in those trials and taking all kinds of vaccines. So Can you please?
Certainly WHO is the group that should be able to provide that information. They were not as rapid as they could have been in doing that. They were examining all the different vaccines. There are other groups now also working on vaccines for pandemics, including the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness and Innovation, which is based in Norway and the United Kingdom. And that group is developing vaccine platforms for types of virus that hopefully will be useful in the future. And during their research that they're providing support for, hopefully they'll be able to look at combinations. It's very important to know which combinations work, which don't. And it's very important also to use the vaccines we have now and not wait for another vaccine to come along. And I'll give you the classic example of that is that smallpox was eradicated, certified in 1980, eradicated. 1981, a new infection, HIV, was identified. 1984, a military recruit in the US vaccinated with smallpox vaccine, developed generalized vaccinia, and this was an AIDS-defining event because he was HIV infected. Had we not used that vaccine to eradicate before 1980, we could not have eradicated until a new vaccine came along, which we have now. So it's very important to use these vaccines when and where they're available.
Now I will request
Thank you. We really had a wonderful evening where David Heyman really explained what it means to address these infectious diseases. I think the topic is still open as I see it. Many questions and the answers are evolving. I learned a lot in this evening session from the talk and the discussions we have had. It's very clear, which we know, that disease for one is disease for all. And this we need to really keep on inventing what are the best ways to do it. I don't think we still have the full algorithm worked out, as I understand. As a physicist, I would like to see the full algorithm, but I know biology is not like that. And I hope it was. But I am learning, and also our One Health mission interaction over the last 2 years with so many stakeholders have told me how to be humble in accepting that we really know only a part of the story. So we should try our best that we don't become victim to the next pandemic at a scale which we had in COVID-19. But we have learned a lot. And all this exercise which many countries are now doing on One Health approach, which we really learned in the G20 meeting when it was being held. Again, it is clear the efforts are on, but I wish there will be more international collaboration, which is possible in a peace time, because COVID was a war time. And now is the time to build all the frameworks, SOPs, and so on. Some of it is happening, but what I have seen, the enthusiasm is not the same as it was in 2023, honestly, because I see a complacency being setting in, because we all believe in God and we think someone else will take care of it. It's not for us. Somehow, I don't know about you, but in India, that is a very good feeling. But I know that is not enough because we have learned it. So on a serious note, we should have this collaborative effort. And the fact that biology does not mean for only doctors and the medical professions. Actually, it spans across all fields. be it engineering, be it sciences, be it humanities. They are so integral part of the whole thing. So this whole of approach is the answer, and I'm sure we will continue to learn from our mistakes and hope that in future we will have less price to pay if and when such a event God forbidden. So on this, I would like to thank again PHFI for all the work you have been doing, and also for organizing a wonderful lecture by David Heyman, which really told us all the points about the infectious diseases and where are the gaps. So thank you once again, and it has been a pleasure being a part of today's evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Sood, for those thoughtful closing reflections and for encapsulating the spirit of today's event so eloquently. As we approach the conclusion of today's ceremony, it is only fitting that we formally express our gratitude to those who enriched this occasion with their presence and valuable insights. As a gesture of appreciation and institutional respect, we shall now present mementos to our distinguished guests. I would like to request our president, Professor Zodpe, to kindly do the honors of presenting the mementos. We would like to express our heartfelt thanks to Professor Ajay Kumar Sood for gracing this occasion. May I request you, sir, to accept this memento? May I now invite Professor David Heyman to accept the memento as a token of our appreciation. Thank you again for your enlightening lecture, sir. Thank you, Professor Zodpe. As we come to an end of today's celebration, I'd like to invite Professor Preeti Kumar, Vice President, Public Health Foundation of India, to express our heartfelt gratitude to everyone who made this event possible on behalf of the PHFI family.
Thank you, Ashna. Honorable Chairperson, esteemed speakers on the dais and in the audience, distinguished guests, colleagues, students, faculty, and all our esteemed visitors to this Foundation Day lecture. It is indeed a privilege to extend a heartfelt vote of thanks as we conclude PHFI's Foundation Day, Program 2025. This evening has really been a remarkable gathering of thought leaders, experts, practitioners, united by a shared commitment to advancing public health. First and foremost, our deepest gratitude to Professor Ajay Kumar Sood, Principal Scientific Advisor to the Government of India, for chairing today's program and for his comments. So thank you so much for giving us an oversight of what all has been done in country to prepare for, as you said, God forbid, for another pandemic, but also opening windows and encouraging us to do collaborations. A special thanks to our Foundation Day speaker, Professor David Heyman, for delivering such a compelling lecture. The insight was that we really need to look into our past to prepare for the future. Thank you for those insightful comments and all the lessons that we can take forward as we prepare for the future. We are also extremely grateful to our chairman, PHFI, Shri S. Ramadurai, for his inspiring words and for his commitment to making sure that PHFI continues to move forward. And under his leadership and guidance, sir, we are sure to strengthen the public health system and contribute effectively to the public health system, not only in country, but beyond. A heartfelt thanks to Professor Sanjay Zodpe, President PHFI, for the warm introduction and of our speakers and for your unwavering commitment to public health education and research. We also extend our thanks to Dr. Raj Shankar Ghosh for skillfully moderating today's discussion, though leaving many people disappointed because they would have liked us to continue for some more time. I would really like to thank the organizing committee, the President's office, the academic committee, and all those people from PHFI, the staff, faculty, our administrative unit, and as Professor Heyman said, those who put up a wonderful cultural program yesterday for their presence and their hard work that has culminated in a successful Foundation Day. To our esteemed guests, faculty members, participants, your fair presence and active engagement has truly enriched this discussion and this program today. Lastly, I would like to conclude and say, let us take forward these insights and inspirations that will guide our future. Thank you once again for all your presence today.
Thank you, Professor Kumar. And ladies and gentlemen, please rise for the national anthem.
जनगणमन अधिनायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड उत्कल बंगा विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उच्चल जलधि तरंगा तव शुभ नामे जागे तव शुभ आशीष मांगे गाहे तव जय गाथा जनगण मंगलदायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता जय हे जय हे जय हे जय 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 हे
Thank you everyone for joining us today and making the Foundation Day truly memorable. May we always be guided by the spirit of knowledge, growth, and excellence. Wishing you a wonderful evening ahead. May I kindly request all of our esteemed dignitaries to remain on stage for a few moments, as we would like to capture this special occasion with a group photograph. Your gracious presence together on this platform is truly a moment worth preserving.